And my phone needs
All
to shut
right.
up.
Well, welcome. This is PhoneWord.org, the Registrar workshop for Wednesday, July the 9th, 2014. It's 5 p.m. Eastern Time, and this is our second Wednesday workshop for the month of July. We'll be repeating the same topic set using the same presentation on Wednesday, July 16th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time for folks that are in Europe and so forth. So we appreciate you joining. Hello, welcome. Somebody just joined?
Robert Schaefer, STS.
Hey, Robert. Thanks for joining. We have Ken Rice on the line. He's also on the Google Hangout who's with FreeSWITCH. And Robert, for those of you that might not know, has been very active in the world of enum and the carrier world. He was with MCI and then Verizon, and I had the pleasure to work with Robert for a number of years in the Country Code 1 enum LLC group and technical advisory committee and so forth. So thanks for joining us today, Robert. So let me talk a little bit about PhoneWord.org, just a brief introduction, and then we'll talk about FreeSWITCH, and hopefully a few other folks from FreeSWITCH will join us today. But PhoneWord.org is an initiative that was sparked by the Federal Communications Commission in January, launched an initiative to really experiment with and trial various elements that are involved in the transition from the public switch telephone network, the old copper network, into an all-internet network. And the idea behind PhoneWord.org is to build a community that is open, that can collaborate not only in North America, not only around this testbed, this numbering testbed initiative that's been launched, but also around the world, because in my view this is a global initiative, it's a global construct, and it's a delight to have FreeSWITCH involved today and talking about some of the new developments that were just announced on FreeSWITCH, which I think are very exciting for what's possible in this numbering and registry initiative that's being experimented with around this all IP transition initiative. So just a little bit of history on this numbering testbed initiative and the all IP transition. It was launched by the Federal Communications Commission in January. On March the 25th, there was a workshop in Washington, D.C., where there were about 80, 90 people that participated in the workshop in person, and then there were another 40 or so that participated on the phone. And we investigated how a new realm of numbering, naming, addressing might be approached in sort of a testbed, innovative fashion. And there were a number of companies that participated, like AT&T, Verizon, the cable companies. There were also some people from the internet world, such as Cisco was there, as well as Mozilla. And there was a great deal of interest expressed by those folks as well in terms of participating in this numbering realm. So since that time, there's been an issues management group that's been formed at the directive of the North American Numbering Council to oversee this numbering testbed initiative, and we're kind of hoping for some direction from the FCC to continue the numbering testbed initiative. As we speak, there's a huge meeting that's going on right now with the local number portability, I believe it's administration, LNPA, and I was participating in that this morning, and the whole focus was on numbering, enum, how does the enum work, what is it going to look like in this transition period, and so forth. So that's kind of a little summary of where we're at and what the intention of today's workshop is. But I invited Ken Rice to join us today, who's one of the central figures in the FreeSWITCH.org initiative. And for some of you that might not know about FreeSWITCH, FreeSWITCH is an open source platform that opens up IP-based telephony in a multitude of ways. It's very powerful. The adoption rate is really accelerating on FreeSWITCH as far as I can tell. But on June the 13th, at the during the VoIP user conference, which I highly recommend to anybody that's listening, just check out vuc.me. Each Friday there's a session, and they really have Randy Resnick's put together some of the top people in the world to participate in this community. But on June the 13th, FreeSWITCH was featured, and they announced and rolled out a new element of their platform, which I think is absolutely awesome, which is JSON RPC, or JSON Remote Procedure Call Protocol. And when I saw that, I thought, wow, this is really revolutionary and a game changer. So I'm delighted to have Ken Rice on with us today. And Ken, why don't you take it from there and cover whatever I've not covered, and tell us a little bit about Verto, which is the JSON RPC element, as well as FreeSWITCH. And then you've got a great conference coming up called ClueCon, and we can talk about that a little bit before.
All right. Well, let's back up a little bit on FreeSWITCH. FreeSWITCH in and of itself is a multi-protocol soft switch. It's built around a strong state machine core and offers both signaling and media for whatever your purposes are. It's largely used today in the hosted PBX environment. It's used in a lot of your well-known conferencing, hosted conferencing platforms, and it's also used in the enterprise and in the call center space for doing things like least cost routing, and also for transitioning from the legacy TDM network into a more VoIP-centric or SIP-centric network. It's been FreeSWITCH was invented about 9 years ago, or 8 or 9 years ago, by Anthony Minasali, who is the leader of the FreeSWITCH project. I'm hoping Anthony will be able to join us here in a minute today, but he is kind of busy. So, but what he back in that point in time, Anthony worked or ran a toll-free carrier. Their main business was selling toll-free numbers for people that needed them for a short-term basis, and would do VoIP-based delivery to those individuals. So rapid turnaround, a lot of numbers, and they ran in with their old platform. They ran into some scalability issues. Tony, being a very talented programmer and a long-term contributor to Asterisk, which is another open-source VoIP platform, he looked at it and said, "What can I do different?" And he started building FreeSWITCH. And one of the main tenets of FreeSWITCH is its modularity. So if you don't need SS7 or you don't want H323, you don't have to load that functionality. You load the bits that you need, and it has everything you need to translate from, say, a legacy PRI or SS7 interconnect over to SIP or H323, or what we have now with WebRTC. With WebRTC and getting into ModVerto here, WebRTC, as you guys know, is the latest thing for bringing in browser-based communications, two-way, no plugins required. Just use Firefox or Chrome, and you can get your video call or voice call going. For you guys using Hangouts today, there's a good possibility that you're using bits of WebRTC. So as people started implementing WebRTC, especially for the voice over IP world, they really looked at SIP and took SIP and implemented SIP into the browser via JavaScript, and makes it where it works with all your legacy SIP hardware or all your existing SIP hardware. So you don't really have to do anything. You translate from WebRTC to SIP is literally stripping off a signaling layer, and then everything else works the same. So with Verto, what happened was the FreeSWITCH dev team. They get together and they look at this, and it's like with SIP for a web-based call, SIP is a bit of overkill. There's a lot of methods and a lot of things in SIP that are to try to allow SIP to bridge back to the legacy ISIP type environment. And so we don't necessarily need all those things. We don't necessarily need alerting or call progress. We don't need a lot of those features for doing it in the browser. So by stripping it down and making Verto, it really removes a lot of the code overhead and makes it more efficient in the browser. The other thing about SIP is there's ways to push information back and forth between the endpoint and the switch, but those are limited, and the way you do it is kind of a pain. So what Tony came up with was a mechanism for using JSON, which when you encode data into JSON versus, say, XML, the JSON's about 30% smaller, so we use less bandwidth, we use less memory in the machines processing it, a lot of stuff like that, and it's really easy to deal with, especially in JavaScript or in your web scripting languages like Perl or PHP, or even on, for you Microsoft guys for the .NET platforms. So it's really well understood. It's used by everybody under the sun, from Twitter to Amazon and everybody else for their, for their browser interactivity. So it's a well understood protocol. You take it, you mix it with WebRTC and FreeSWITCH, and now you have the ability to not only initiate calls from the browser, but in real time push events from FreeSWITCH back across that WebSocket's control channel that's part of WebRTC, and now display information in the browser that's coming from the telephone network. So a prime example of this is we all use conference bridges all the time. There's a lot of us using one right here, right now. Traditionally, if we want to show who's in the conference, there's an external application that's monitoring all the calls coming up and down, and then that gets pushed into the browser. With this gives the switch the capability to directly feed information back out to the user in the browser. As part of this, some of the core API calls in FreeSWITCH were exposed, so there had to be a whole new security mechanism built in here too, to make it where your average end user just can't start willy-nilly, originating calls to places you don't want them to, and doing things that they shouldn't do. But it also leaves us the ability to now, for your specific application, whatever it may be, implement your own module in something like JavaScript or Lua or one of the other common scripting languages directly into the switch on FreeSWITCH to handle those events, and then implement your business logic there. So you can split it up kind of like we've done traditionally. You have some smarts or almost no smarts in the phone, and most of the smarts back on the network. But it also at the same time allows us to split those in half, so we can put some of those smarts where they seem to make the most sense, and reduce some of the load on the core of the network, or at least on the processing in the core of the network. So if you go to a prime example of how this can work is the conference.freeswitch.org website. If you go to conference.freeswitch.org/Verto, V-E-R-T-O, I do recommend you use the latest version of Chrome or Firefox for visiting that site, and I do recommend a good stereo headset on your computer. With that, you can call right there. There's at the bottom of the page. There's a list of numbers that you can call and test this out. And this does not use SIP. This uses Verto from the browser to FreeSWITCH, and then FreeSWITCH literally If you're going off box, we'll convert it to SIP, or in some cases, there may be PSTN access on there, where you can actually dial a number and go out to the PSTN, and in that case it's converted from Verto possibly to SIP or to TDM to go back out to the network. Now this is just one leg of the entire communication mechanism. So we have the browser to the server component taken care of, or to the switch component taken care of, and then once we've got it there, we can use our the technologies or protocols that we're already used to, SS7, IMS, etc., to then shovel that call around the internet or around the PSTN.
Ken,
I know.
Ken,
Yes.
excuse me, I've got a question. I I was having a little trouble with my screen share here on the Hangout, but I've got the webrtc.freeswitch.org up, and so that folks that are viewing this can see it. One question I had for you was, when I've played around with this and dialed a number, and I invite people to play with this because I think it's really, really cool, but I didn't get the permission to use the microphone button. If it came up, maybe it only came up once. Are you guys using some sort of something?
In Chrome here. This is Chrome, right? Yeah, it looks like Chrome. Up near where you have the star up there, once you make a call, you will see what looks like a little video camera icon.
Okay.
You just click that video camera icon, and it will allow you to adjust the permissions there. And that part is specific to Chrome. Firefox has a similar mechanism for allowing you to do that.
Okay. Well, I thought that was really great that, every time I was pulling up the WebRTC demo or the Verto demo, it wasn't asking me for permission each time. So anyway.
Right, yeah, and that particular part is a function of the browser. Depending on how you allow permissions with WebRTC on a specific website, it may or may not ask you in the future. You can actually tell the browser to only allow this for this one phone call, and then or don't allow this at all, or only allow it for this website, but don't don't ask me again for this particular website. The reason for this part of the security there is nobody wants to go to a web page, when they're sitting down at 10 o'clock, pretty much ready for bed, and be surprised because now all of a sudden they're in live video chat with, grandma. Or somebody else from the office. That would be a little bit inappropriate. So the WebRTC designers have built in some stuff to help us protect us from ourselves and from illicit uses there. So that security is actually built in fairly good. The other, along the lines of security with WebRTC in general, WebRTC does use secure WebSockets, which are SSL, TLS based for the control and communications channel, for the data channel. And then for the media half of it, it uses RTP and DTLS. DTLS is analogous to using SRTP. It's just a little bit different mechanism for encoding the RTP so that it is secure from end to end. So that security is already built in there, and from a carrier perspective, especially a licensed carrier perspective in the States, there are probably some CLIA requirements that may need to be addressed there, but I don't think they're that big of an issue. Once you control the network, you can control how the encryption works on there. So as far as complying with CLIA, I don't see that as an issue at all.
Okay.
You may need to update some of your CLIA gear.
Let's break a little bit. I'm sorry I interrupted you, Ken, but Robert, do you have any questions at this point for Ken?
Yeah, I do have one.
Go ahead.
Got a bad echo here too. Is this affected only on port 80, or is there other ports involved for the end user?
For the end user, there are other ports involved. You do have port 80 or port 443 for your regular HTTP traffic. For WebRTC, you do have a separate port assigned for the WebSocket connection, and that is that you can actually funnel that onto port 80 or port 443, depending on whether you're doing secure or clear text WebSockets. And then you have a separate component for the media, for the audio and or video, and that is your traditional RTP, just like you would see with SIP or H323. So there, then that of course is UDP traffic. So you would under restrictive corporate firewall, you would need to make some adjustments for there. From a consumer standpoint, you don't really have to do anything because WebRTC does support stun and ICE, which is specifically for dealing with the NAT problems that we've all run across dealing with consumers. And
Thank you.
Hey, Robert, if you've got an echo, you might want to check your browsers, because if it's a significant delay, you might be watching the video on this through a browser. I've run into that problem before. So if you close.
Thank you. My only connection is the call-in number, and
okay.
I'm not connected to Hangouts. Although if you have my address, you can send me something on that.
Okay.
Please, thank you.
Okay. All right. So Ken, I'm sorry I interrupted you there.
No, that's okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I think the next thing that I wanted to get to was, we get the WebRTC call back to FreeSWITCH or back to your WebRTC gateway server here. In this case with Verto, it's FreeSWITCH. And then we have to do something with that call to get it out to the to the other end of the connection. From there, we can go to a more traditional SS7 network or TDM network, or even with FreeSWITCH, we have the capabilities built into FreeSWITCH already to query an enum registry via DNS and get the routing information from there. FreeSWITCH itself is already domain-based, just like email. So it allows us to do some other things like let people use their email address as their address on the system. So, or we can translate via DNS SRV and enum from an enum record and know how to route that call out, whether it's SIP, H323, or other appropriate mechanism that the enum may tell us to use.
Cool. Now,
so
are you using?
Yeah,
I'm involved with E164.org. Are you using that as your enum registry, or what are you using?
Currently, we are.
Okay.
Unfortunately, as you know, CC1 enum didn't quite go anywhere.
Right.
I wish it would have, but E164.org was originally started by some guys in Australia that were trying to scratch that same itch that we all have, wanting to bypass the PSTN where possible, or the legacy PSTN. So, and they ran that successfully for quite a few years, and then they handed it over to a group here in the States about 2 years ago that's associated with the open source telephony application group,
right.
OSTag. And and I've been involved with that a little bit. We're in the process of reworking it a little bit because these zone files are getting quite large. I think we have somewhere around 40 or 50 million publicly provided enum entries in there right now, where people have literally come in, listed their own numbers, and then we validate that number via the PSTN and revalidate it on a regular basis to make sure the data is good. Unfortunately, a lot of the carriers, especially the tier 1s and tier 2s, they don't want to list their numbers in enum. I'm hoping bill and keep, the new bill and keep rules will try to fix some of that issue, but until that's addressed, I don't really see a big unfortunately see a big growth in enum in the near term.
Well, we'll see, because there's a lot of the volume on that conversation has increased significantly.
Hopefully.
So
yeah, hopefully it's changing.
yeah, and just so you know, Robert and I spent a lot of time for a number of years talking about, you know, public enum, provider enum, and working that issue. So.
Right. Well, I mean, there's definitely some issues related around, you know, public enum versus provider enum. Public enum can be such some dirty data because people throw up an asterisk box or a FreeSWITCH box and go look at their number, and then all of a sudden they turn it off and forget about it. So I mean, that's a battle we fight all the time. I would love to see carriers push their data into e164.org. We would be more than happy to help them out with that, and even provide them an interfaces where, as long as we can validate the LRN on the number is pointed to them, we'll be more than happy to give them pointers in e164.org so that they can take that traffic that way.
Cool.
But that's and that's something that they could literally do with a FreeSWITCH-based gateway on their side to protect their more you know, their capital expenditure hardware that we all know they have internally.
But you do have a lookup functionality on this Verto demo?
I don't know if there's if that's enabled on that demo, because the enum lookup functionality is separate from Verto. It's another plug-in for FreeSWITCH. The FreeSWITCH is very much like a browser where you have all the different plugins that make it do all the extra tricks. And FreeSWITCH is designed the same way. As Tony told me one time, we've got a bunch of wheels already. Let's quit inventing them and use the ones we've already got.
Right.
So, the system was designed in such a way, if we need a new wheel like Verto or even SIP over WebSockets, WebRTC style, then, you know, we can easily invent those and plug that into the system. You know, all being relative there. But everything else that's already been done is just a plug-in. So if we don't need that functionality, we can disable it, and when we need it, we can enable it and use that for, you know, to assist in routing the calls, whatever we need to do there. So, for instance, by default, FreeSWITCH does not ship with an SS7 stack. That is a commercial product made by a company in Canada called Sangoma. It's not open source, but the SIP stack, the H323 stack, the SCCP or Skinny stack for you guys with Cisco phones, that is all something that's open source and you get when you download and install FreeSWITCH.
Okay. And is FreeSWITCH, do you have to have a freestanding machine to run FreeSWITCH, or can you deploy it in the cloud? Or
It depends on the scenario. I personally don't recommend deploying it on things like EC2 just because it's dealing with real-time data, namely the media streams, and you don't have a lot of control over what else is running on the same piece of hardware. In a private cloud situation, I run FreeSWITCH under both KVM and OpenVZ virtualization. I know of several private cloud situations where they're using things like VMware, and it works quite well. The Verto demonstration there that you've got on the screen share is actually ran under OpenVZ. And that particular demo server we use as the FreeSWITCH public conference server, and we have anywhere from 30 to 70 people on that thing at one time. And because we use it internally for all of our developers, which are spread out around the world, to communicate in real time. And we also do multiple community-facing conference calls for FreeSWITCH, where the community is invited to show up and ask us questions and see presentations for various open source stuff that's related to either directly or indirectly related to FreeSWITCH. And that all runs under virtualization.
Okay.
Now, if you're doing something bigger, so like you're a tier 1 or a tier 2 carrier, and you want to do like class 4-ish VoIP switching, you may want to run that on dedicated hardware. and you're probably going to run more than one of them anyway. So it's you can definitely do things at a large scale with FreeSWITCH.
So I've got the diagram under the Verto, the mod underscore Verto page. That diagram showing on the screen share right now, with the Firefox or Chrome WebRTC client on the left side of the image, and then the PSTN or peer carrier on the right side. Is there anything you'd like to say about that configuration or that architecture?
The architecture here is very straightforward, and like you're used to with in a traditional SIP or H323 environment, you do have the Verto signaling protocol, which, as you said, is JSON based, and then you have modRTC on the Verto side, which is another FreeSWITCH module that handles the media, handles DTLS, which is basically RTP. So converting there is fairly easy. One thing this doesn't really show is scaling out. Verto inherently, because of it's web-based, allows us to have multiple FreeSWITCH servers on the back end to spread that load out, so you can conceivably in one system support tens of thousands of users just by spreading them out over several FreeSWITCH boxes. And then on the PSTN side here, this particular diagram is just showing SIP. It is possible to have other protocols there, be it SIP, H323, Skinny, Sangoma, not Sangoma, but SS7, etc. in there. We already know that FreeSWITCH itself will work in a IMS environment as an application server or as a gateway server. That is, FreeSWITCH has been to multiple IMS bake-offs in that environment. So you could literally use Verto as a gateway to get your web-based clients into your IMS network for the wireless carriers.
Cool.
So the possibilities here is, what can we imagine to do? I think the big deal is what's going to happen with the actual shutdown of the legacy copper PSTN and move from circuit switch, completely over to packet switch networking for our regular voice communications, and then we can really address that. I don't see at this point in time anything that really stops us from doing that with FreeSWITCH. Pretty much the only reason that we don't have a public SS7 stack for FreeSWITCH is just because of the cost of the documentation to do it the right way. Somebody has to fund that, and if that were publicly available documentation, I think we'd probably already have that.
Cool.
So it really depends. It's one of those things. FreeSWITCH itself is a open source platform, so the way that it works for you guys that are only partially familiar with open source or not familiar at all is the developers develop the software and we give it to you for free. The way we make a living off of it is we then, when you run into something you can't do yourself, we then offer consulting services and that kind of stuff to make it where you can be successful with your deployment. It's kind of like getting a car that's with a bunch of extra parts, and if you can do it yourself, go for it, have fun. We'll give you all the manuals. If you need help, you can call the mechanic up and we can get it done, hopefully faster than you can by figuring it out.
Cool. I'm trying to include Robert here on the Hangout, but anything else? Ken, I know you got to go pretty soon. Anything?
Yeah, in fact, I've got to go here in just a minute. If anybody else has any questions, please feel free to ask me.
Okay. Robert, do you have any questions for Ken?
I think we covered it. Thank you very much, sir.
All right. Yeah, appreciate it, Robert. Actually, Robert, at some point in time, if Jay could trade contact information between us, I'd like to talk to you about enum for just a minute.
Be happy to do that.
Robert, is it okay if I give Ken your email address?
Yes, sir.
All right. I'm gonna
And feel free to pass my email address over to him,
Okay.
Jay.
All right. And
yeah.
Ken, would you talk a little bit about ClueCon?
Yeah, definitely. For the developer or the voice telecom voice over IP engineering coming up this August. The dates are August. Let's see here, 4th through the 7th. And possibly the 8th, is ClueCon. ClueCon is the annual open source voice over IP developers conference in Chicago. This year it will be at the Intercontinental Hotel in downtown Chicago. And we have probably about 200 to 250 of the developers from around the world that are really heavily involved in voice over IP and internet communications in general. Everybody from Asterisk developers, FreeSWITCH developers. If you're familiar with OpenSIPs, which is a very efficient, high-speed SIP proxy. Bogdan, and I cannot remember his last name off the top of my head, and I couldn't pronounce it anyway, will be there talking about OpenSIPs and working on OpenSIPs. Anthony Minasali, who invented FreeSWITCH, will be there. Phil Zimmerman, who is one of the premier cryptographers in our time, will be there talking about security related to voice over IP and IP communications. Phil, for you guys, a little history lesson, is the gentleman that invented PGP and got the ire of the federal government for releasing one of the easiest to use email encryption programs back in the late 80s, early 90s, and he is also the chief technical officer for Silent Circle, which is well known for providing secure telephony clients for things like iPhone, and I think their latest product that they're dropping is the Black Phone, which is a secure telephone that you can use pretty much anywhere, cellular phone style. Guys like that from all over the world will be at ClueCon. And people from the carrier space, people from the developer space. If you can show up, it's definitely worth your time. From the engineering perspective, it's a conference. It is not a trade show. So it's a lot of information traded over the course of the week. From a business perspective, it is a place to find people to help build up your organization, especially if you're looking for people, or especially if you're looking to move into the voice over IP space, or you're already there and you're looking to enhance your network. It's definitely a space to find good talent.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And how much does it cost to attend? And
ClueCon is $7.99. If you're staying there at the hotel, we have let's see here, we have a special rate. I believe it is $189 a night there with the hotel, and you can go to cluecon.com to get more information on the hotel and more information on what's going to go on at ClueCon, what the registration, what the schedule is, and that sort of thing. Also of interest for people that aren't familiar with FreeSWITCH but want to get more technically proficient with FreeSWITCH is on Friday following ClueCon there will be a one-day boot camp that starts out installing FreeSWITCH and moves into some of the mid-tier and more advanced topics. Boot camp style would be 8 solid hours, and that's $2.99 for that day.
Awesome.
And for the instructors for that will be FreeSWITCH developers, actual core FreeSWITCH developers, and the authors of the FreeSWITCH 1.2 book and the FreeSWITCH cookbook, which are very helpful. If you can't attend, you can find those from Pact Publishing.
Cool. Okay, looks like Robert's successfully joined us on the Hangout. So, hey, Robert.
Is the audio working?
The audio is working, yes.
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
So we're good.
All right. Well, hey, Jay, I hate to do it. It's been great talking with you today. Robert, nice to meet you. Everybody else that's listening, you can find out more about FreeSWITCH and Verto via freeswitch.org. Come hang out with us next month at ClueCon. That's cluecon.com. And, you know, we'd love to see you guys there. Also, Wednesdays at noon Central Time, there is a regular FreeSWITCH public conference. Join us there and you can find out more about FreeSWITCH, ask questions of the developers and the community in general, and we'd be more than happy to help you out.
Yeah, cool. All right, Ken.
And
well,
Jay, I do have to run now, so thanks for having me, and I will talk to you guys later.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ken. And we're going to have another session next week. I'll send you some information on that. If you can join, great. If not, then we'll probably just do a recap of today. So thanks, and appreciate your time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye. All right, Robert, do you have any questions for me, or was that interesting?
Yeah, there was something said about a Friday regular session that he mentioned. I missed that.
Okay, yeah, let me put that up on the screen. It's called the VUC, or the VoIP User Conference, and I highly recommend it if you haven't attended. They do a Google Hangout. It's run by a fellow named Randy Resnick over in France, and he really has some of the top people in the world on this. He's now calling it the IP community and VoIP community, but if it's V as in Victor, U as in Ulysses, C as in Charlie, .me like me. And on June the 13th, there was about an hour-and-a-half session with FreeSWITCH on, there, I've got it up on the screen share now, with FreeSWITCH on this Verto new plugin, and you know, they went into depth on June the 13th, or yeah, June the 13th. So I'd highly recommend that. I think you'd find those sessions of great interest, Robert, and I think you could probably contribute to the conversation for sure. So
thank you. I didn't know about that.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments or so forth, Robert?
Don't think so. Thank you for doing this.
I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up, and if there's, and we will have another session next week, next Wednesday, July the 16th. It will be at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. We will probably review some of this information, maybe have some more, and possibly have some other folks on with us. So again, the PHONEWORD.org workshops are the second Wednesday of every month at 5 p.m. Eastern, and then the third Wednesday of every month at 11 a.m. Eastern. And we also have the PHONEWORD Forum, which is the last Wednesday of the month, and that's more general topics. The workshops are really designed to be more technical. So, Robert, thanks for joining us. I think we're now connected, so it'll be easier to get you on the Hangout next time.
Yep, thank you, sir.
All right. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.